Welcome, everyone, to the PFF Fantasy Podcast, IDP edition. I'm your host, Jon Macri, and today we wrap up our IDP rookie rankings episodes with a fun defensive back group to sort through. We've covered the defensive linemen and the linebackers already, which you can check out now as well. But today, it's those fun and versatile DBs, mostly the safeties that we're going to dive into here. I love figuring out DBs for IDP. I hope you do too, because that's what this one's all about. So let's get it. All right, let's keep it going here. Let the rookie content flow through you while we're still in the midst of rookie draft season. And what better way to wrap up the rookie IDP discussions than with my guy, Jon Glosser from dynastynerds.com, talking some rookie defensive backs, which I always particularly enjoy. Jon, how are you today?
Very good, sir. Thank you for having me back on. When we do the Two Johns podcast, it's always about the DBs. So I'm glad you enjoy it as much as I do.
I do, man. Yeah, I love figuring out the DB usage and figuring out which of these guys are actually going to be worth drafting and which ones are, just cannon fodder to maybe pick up off the waiver wires at some point during the season. But there's always a few that we're interested in. That we come up with every season, and this year probably no different. So it'll be fun, man. We went through this group pre-draft, and we talked about mostly defensive backs and one running back as well, with Sione Vaki, who did get drafted as a running back to the Detroit Lions. So shout out to me for putting him on the list. But today we are going to look at just defensive backs. We're going to go over 8, I'd say highly drafted defensive backs. We're not going to cover really any of the outside corners just because they're mostly a really basic evaluation for IDP purposes that, as long as if they're starting or not, that's a lot of what you're looking for because it's such a deep position with incredibly unstable production. So not something we need to spend much time on. Instead, we're going to cover some of the more interesting defensive backs, the safeties, and potentially slot corners who could find their way onto the field and, more importantly, onto IDP rosters. These aren't also, necessarily players that we're spending significant rookie draft capital on, but they could be of interest nonetheless. And for that reason, we're going to sort them out. Again, I love talking safeties specifically. They're a fun position in the NFL. And as Antoine Winfield just proved, a very valuable one, even if that isn't the case for IDP as much in terms of value. There are always reasons we're going to find to target certain guys. Today is going to be another one of those days. So we'll get into it here. And we'll start with the hot name in this year's DB class, at least for IDP. It is Cooper DeJean out of Iowa, now with the Philadelphia Eagles after they traded up to grab him, 40th overall in the second round. Glosser, what did you think about DeJean in Philly?
Feels like a luxury pick. I know we might have caught a little heat, for kind of derailing the Cooper train on the pre-draft episode, but honestly, probably not really a worse landing spot, at least for immediate impact. It's a luxury pick for the Eagles just because of what they got going on offense. Is obviously they need defense, especially a skill player like this. We spoke about Cooper pre-draft is really good football player, and I think Philly's going to find a way to use him. But as an IDP manager and an analyst, where do you see that going? I even had some conversations pre-draft with a few people about, where I rank him and here and there. And I think the safety thing is, I'm not buying into the whole safety position thing. I think it's nickelback. Not that he can't have value there. If he gets that cornerback tag in those cornerback required leagues, you're potentially looking at someone that's kind of going to give you a big advantage. And especially, I think, as we touched on early, the return yards leagues, I definitely see him at least returning punts. Kickoffs probably aren't going to be a thing anymore, but I don't think Reed Blankenship is great, but I also don't feel like that's going to be where Cooper fits in. You're also talking Sidney Brown last year. He's obviously not going to start over Gardner Johnson. I think, if anything, it sounds like in camp he's rookie camp, he's obviously slotted in as the nickel back. When you get in there and you get a mandatory camp, and then you got Avonte Maddox, and it's a loaded depth chart right now. I mean, obviously some veterans there and that he can learn from, but I'm still worried about him potentially playing outside corner. I know a lot of people aren't really on that train, but I mean, when you have a guy as athletic as that, and as that, and as productive as that, is like, I think Philly's going to put him wherever they have a need, and they've been battling injuries, it seems like, going into the postseason the last couple of years, both at linebacker and defensive backfield. So the last thing I had on him, I think of 7 leagues that I've done so far, I've only seen one that he's been undrafted in. All the rest, I think you're looking at, the earliest I've seen was 4.11, but typically in the 5th round, there's kind of the sweet spot. I did see him go 6.05, probably is the latest that I've seen him go outside of the undrafted league.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. I mean, I saw him, the earliest I've seen him was, I think, 3.12. It was an Iowa homer. Shout out Eric Harms. But yeah, that was
go
mostly
get your
the
guys.
reason why. Yeah, that's kind of exactly what it was. So I'd like, for that reason, I get it. But yeah, mostly we're not drafting him the deep defensive backs or cornerbacks that high. But like you said, yeah, it is not the easiest path to snaps in year one for Cooper DeJean. Like you said, he probably fits best as that nickel corner role, but they did just sign Chauncey Gardner-Johnson to a 3-year deal. I mean, unless they're going to move Gardner-Johnson to safety, he's played safety before, like Sidney Brown. As much as I love him, a Canadian hero, and I don't want to see him lose his job. He's also coming off a late season ACL tear as well, right? So he might not even be ready for the start of the year. So Reed Blankenship, yeah, I agree. Like he's not amazing by any means, but he's kind of earned that starting spot. I think he's played relatively well for them, so he's probably locked in there. Where maybe it's DeJean in the slot and maybe Gardner-Johnson at safety. I don't know. I know that Gardner-Johnson, is pretty good out of the slot as well. So I think that would be the primary focus for him. We'll see how it all shakes out. But then, you look at the outside corner spots, like you said, too, like that's definitely a possibility. Darius Slay and James Bradbury are the presumed starters on the outside, but both of those guys are now into their 30s, started to show some decline last season relative to what we're used to from them. Like Slay posted a 68.6 coverage grade. That was his lowest since 2020. James Bradbury particularly ended up having like a significantly worse season in 2023 than what we got from him in 2022. He went from a career high 80.2 coverage grade in 2022, as well as I think he was an all-pro as well, to a career low 52.0 coverage grade, and then allowed 10 touchdowns in his coverage on the year after previously allowing just 2 in that, including the playoffs in 2022. So, the team also drafted Quinyon Mitchell in the first as well, who I think is going to push for a starting job on the outside, right? Like it's probably unlikely that we see both Mitchell and DeJean start over like Slay and Bradbury, for example, so assuming both of those guys are healthy and on the roster. So I don't know. It doesn't leave a ton of great options for DeJean other than potentially Gardner-Johnson moving to safety. I think that's probably his best bet to get on the field, because I'm with you. He could play safety, sure. Like he doesn't have a lot of experience there, but it just feels unlikely at this point, considering the depth chart. The thing with him, always why we're drafting him for IDP and why people like him for IDP is that versatility. So there's definitely, roles that he can play within that defense. It just, with us not knowing exactly what that role is going to be and leaving question marks like that, it makes him a bit of a riskier rookie draft pick, especially if you're taking him, earlier in rookie drafts, in the middle of rookie drafts. I think, 5th round, that's where I'm looking at him at the very earliest, end of, and really kind of the end of the 5th round. I just don't want to deal with it. Like, I know that the return yardage upside could potentially be there. How much of it per game you're going to get, considering returns in the NFL, kind of dwindling, we'll see. But yeah, it just, he's more that 5th round range for me. He's interesting, but there's also a lot of question marks. So I think, you're getting him and hoping for the most optimal outcome, which might not happen right away. Let's see. Yeah. All right. Next up, we got a player that, well, we at least know is going to play safety in the NFL, right? To start his career. This is the first true orthodox safety drafted here, goes to the New York Giants. It's Tyler Nubin, drafted 2nd round, 47th overall. And Nubin, I think, becomes pretty interesting for me because, something we talked about pre-draft with him was kind of expecting more of a deep safety type role. He's more that deep safety archetype in the NFL, so might not be like as valuable for IDP outside of just starting and being on the field where, he could produce through volume. And to an extent, like this landing spot is a good one for exactly that, where he should be an immediate starter when comparing him to what else the Giants have at safety, like Jalen Mills and Dane Belton and Jason Pinnock. So I think that part is likely set for him. The other part of it is how he'll fit into this Giants defense. And I think a lot of people are going to be quick to compare what he can be to, what Xavier McKinney was last year. But it's important to remember now that this is likely going to be a different defense under Shane Bowen, who comes over from Tennessee, than what it was under Wink Martindale last year. So Martindale's Giants, they were actually top 10 in the league in terms of single high coverages, which we typically prefer for IDP for at least one of these team safeties, because they'll be getting a lot more work closer to the line of scrimmage, while we can, sacrifice the other safety on that team in order to get at least one of those IDP friendly deployments for a safety on the team. But yeah, McKinney, because of that, like, he got some really decent usage as that safety to rotate down toward the line of scrimmage. 42% of his snaps coming on either the defensive line or in the box, and then another 15% in the slot as well. So obviously we love that for IDP. We'll take that all day. But unfortunately, like, Bowen's Tennessee defense didn't really operate that way. They were actually bottom 10 in the league in terms of single high coverages, with about 10% of snaps fewer than the 2023 Giants. So about 100 defensive snaps. But yeah, so it's just a lot more too high looks. And I think, for Nubin, his fairer comparison, instead of McKinney, probably more closely aligned to like Elijah Molden or Amani Hooker last year, those kind of guys that, who weren't terrible when Kevin Byard was traded away, but just not to the same level of what McKinney was able to do last year. So just with that in mind, I think it's worth kind of, tempering expectations a little bit for Nubin, because it isn't likely to be a top 10 tackle role, though he could still be productive, right? And another thing that I talked about pre-draft with Nubin was that I did want to see him in more of a too high system, because I think he could be much better in that regard, as opposed to leaving him as the lone single high safety. So I don't mind the spot for him at all. He's definitely in consideration as one of the top 2 safeties for me in rookie drafts. Again, probably I think closer to the end of the 4th round typically is where I'd be looking at him at the earliest.
Yeah, I agree with you on Nubin. I mean, I had Nubin, as my DB1, pre-draft. I think the landing spot kind of, helped there. And I think he stays in that role for me. I think you hit the nail on the head too. Amani Hooker's who I had in terms of a comp with the defensive coordinator coming over. And also in the division you play in, you're probably going to be stuck in a lot more too high than you would have been in, when you're playing for Tennessee over there. But, to your point, 388 box snaps for McKinney last year. I know we're talking a different defense, but I mean, I think Nubin steps in as the most talented DB, safety there amongst that group. Not a ton of competition, but, Pinnock, I think, had his moments last year, but those were really like kind of impact play driven. I don't think that's also a guy that was free. on waivers last year. So Nubin's versatility and toughness, I think, are like the two things that the Giants are liking when they're trying to remold that defense. I really do like what they're doing along the defensive line. So I think, there is going to be some opportunities there. But Nubin himself as a player, I really do like the player. I think he definitely, we discussed at pre-draft some of the limitations he has, but I think he's going to step in and play an insane amount of snaps as a rookie. So he has a really good chance to, give immediate impact for IDP managers. Earliest I seen him, and I promise everyone this was not me, was 402 was the earliest I seen him. 5'11 was the latest. I think I'm more along with you, mid to late fifth there when you're kind of most of your offensive talent dries up and your linebackers and D-line kind of go off there. But yeah, there's really amongst this class, versatility is one of the biggest things I think we keep coming back to. But now that we have kind of teams to these players, we're kind of like, pre-draft or preseason, like breaking it down of where we think that they'll be. Nubin probably has one of the best opportunities in terms of a guy that is just going to play a lot.
Yeah, no, he's got a great opportunity too. Like you said, like it's not like he's not going to get any box snaps, right? It's just with that defense specifically, it's just less than ideal, I guess, right? But he's still going to. I think he's still probably the favorite to get those snaps on that Giants defense, because he's also like slightly the biggest one of the bunch between him and Jalen Mills and Belton and even Pinnock. So I think that helps his case, at least as far as being able to hold up in the box when they do rotate towards those single high coverages. But still like him. I think he can definitely be a usable IDP safety just based on volume alone, and then what he can provide on top of that is going to be a bonus. So somebody that could be worth drafting there near the end of drafts. All right, back to these.
When you have Daniel Jones as your quarterback, like unfortunately, you're just going to play a lot of defensive snaps. So maybe it works out for the best, maybe it doesn't. It's not a proven theory, but at least something to put out there.
It's definitely something to look into. We know that Daniel Jones is I feel like this could be the last year for him. We'll see. But yeah, they're giving him opportunities at least. So we'll see what happens there. But yeah, back to these kind of guys, that we're looking at for the defensive backs. I mean, these are really and probably another one of these tweener guys who we weren't fully sure pre-draft if they'd be like safety or nickel corner, but Javon Bullard out of Georgia was one of those guys that we talked about him like more of a natural fit in the slot. It was where he looked most comfortable and where at least I found like his best play came from. But he lands on a safety needy defense of the Green Bay Packers, who did add Xavier McKinney this offseason, but outside of him, it's bleak to say the least. So he goes in the second round. What did you think about this landing spot for Javon Bullard?
I'm with you. I think we talked about it pre-draft. Bullard, not last season, but the season before, was a pretty much monster playing out of that, star position, that slot position for Georgia. Got really, moved to safety when Tykee Smith took that over, a year later. But I would like to see him. I mean, it's early, right? Rookie mini camps are the only things that started, but it seems like he's going to slot in as right next to X, at safety. And McKinney is just like a jack of all trades. He's going to play all over that defense. It is a new defense under Jeff Hafley coming from Boston College. And, from the things that I'm reading is kind of like more like man press type stuff. So I'll be interested to see, but like to your point, like that secondary is not very good. So Bullard's a proven player who's come in and having production, but I would just feel a little bit better if he was more in the nickel role. But like I just don't see who starts alongside McKinney if he is moved to a nickel role, because it's pretty bad there. But that is an overall young defense. I mean, you got Quay Walker, who's kind of leading those linebackers there, and then they bring in Edge Cooper. I think they drafted along with Bullard 2 other safeties as well. So it is an extremely young defense. A lot. I mean, if you're an Xavier McKinney manager right now, you're probably pretty excited because he should be in line for a pretty monster year. I like Bullard, but he's a guy that you're really just hoping for the best on in terms of ADP for him. I've seen him go as late as 707 and as early as 501, but some of those are more, kind of, some of those leagues are DB higher scoring and things like that. I don't think he's a guy that's super high on the radar. I'm curious to see how he's used, but I mean, if we're going back and looking at Green Bay DBs, safeties in particular, there isn't really one that stands out for quite a while from an IDP perspective.
Yeah, it is Anthony Johnson Jr., Zane Anderson, Kitan Oladapo. Like, man, it's I like Bullard's chances of starting, at safety, but. Yeah, the nickel role, I'm with you. I think that would have been my preferred spot for him. The Packers do have Keyshawn Nixon still, who was their primary slot in 2023. But, it's not like he was amazing by any means either. It was his first time playing a full season really as a starter, had never played more than 300 snaps in a season prior to this, since he was like a UDFA in 2019 for the Oakland Raiders. Like this year, it wasn't great by any means, like 16.1% missed tackle rate with 14 missed tackles. So tied for the 6th worst at his position. You typically want your slot guys to be able to tackle because they're going to be helpful defending the run a lot more closer to the box as well. So there's, things about Nixon's game that probably not ideal, but there's definitely could be a path there for Bullard to still be a slot corner as a rookie in Green Bay. If he does outshine Keyshawn Nixon this offseason, which based on those numbers might not be overly difficult to do. But yeah, either way, there's definitely a path for him to start, even if he sticks at safety. I mean, again, we got another, defensive coordinator change here with the Packers, like you said, bringing in Jeff Hafley. They previously had Joe Barry, who deployed a top 5 rate of single high coverage last year, which would be really nice. Unfortunately, he also had some of the worst tackling safeties in the league with Rudy Ford, Darnell Savage, and even Anthony Johnson, who is still there. Yeah, Anthony Johnson, that dude had a 28.1% missed tackle rate, which was the 2nd highest mark among qualifying safeties last year. We don't know exactly what Hafley's scheme is going to be. Like you said, it could be that press man defense that to kind of keep an eye on. But, college defenses, NFL defenses, typically wildly different. So whatever the case, Bullard, makes sense as a starter, considering the draft capital, the pedigree coming out of Georgia. He's going to get starting snaps this year at some point, whether it's to start the year or very quickly, either over Nixon in the slot or Johnson at safety. So that puts him in draft consideration for me, right? Like for rookie drafts, early, 5th round, probably the earliest I'd be taking him as well, right around that Cooper DeJean range. Not, getting overly excited, but I think there's definitely a path there for him.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend the same coverage that you use on an ACC receiver on Justin Jefferson. So,
yeah, it probably wouldn't work out too good for Jeff Hafley sticking around in the NFL, but we'll see. Hopefully he can get some decent coverage out there with what they've drafted this year. We'll see how it shakes out. But like you said, it's a young defense and they got some work to do. So. Next up is a guy that we did not talk about in the pre-draft episode. I did end up covering him in the pre-draft sleepers episode. That's what it was with Mike Wohlert. And it is Cole Bishop out of Utah. So he gets drafted in the 2nd round, 60th overall. Otherwise, Cole Bishop is known as the good safety out of Utah. May we never speak running back Sione Vaki's name again. But I came away, when I watched Cole Bishop, I wish we talked about him on the pre-draft pod, because I really liked Bishop. When I took the time to watch him and just in as far as projecting him into an IDP friendly role in the NFL, spent a ton of time in the box and around the line of scrimmage during his college career. 41% of his snaps came in the box alone. And you could just tell that he has a great feel for how to play that position and be productive as a tackler because of it. So, for Bishop, you look at the Bills depth chart, there aren't a lot of great options here to consider competition for him. Like Jordan Poyer's off to Miami. Micah Hyde is still a free agent. I guess he could come back, which would definitely hurt Bishop's chances of playing. But other than that, it's Mike Edwards, Taylor Rapp, Cam Lewis, DeMar Hamlin. I think we're looking at Rapp and Edwards as the starters. Both of those guys are, probably tougher competition than what Javon Bullard is seeing in Green Bay outside of Xavier McKinney, but still not an impossible path for him to break through either. Like I'm slightly hesitant to kind of fully embrace him as a year one starter in Buffalo, just because I think those two guys, Rapp and Edwards, are actually fine starting options. And we know how the NFL values experience. And both of these guys have over 3,000 defensive snaps each of NFL experience. I think that's an important thing to kind of keep in mind, and probably gives them the edge to start the year. But that being said, even if it isn't this year, I really like Cole Bishop's long-term potential in Buffalo and for IDP, because I do think he can rotate down every so often, play in the box, even though, they were one of those, like a bottom 3 team in the league last year in terms of single high coverage rate. But you got a new defensive coordinator this year, Bobby Babbage, who does come from Babbage. Yeah, he comes from within the Bills defense. So might not change all that much, at least at first, the defensive scheme. But you give me a guy like Cole Bishop, great instincts, ability to make tackles all over the field, and that's going to get me excited for him for IDP, regardless of landing spot. So he's actually safety 1 for me in this class now, post-draft. Like he's still, at the very best, like a late 4th round pick, but I love the potential here. Second best first contact rate in this rookie safety class at 8.8%, which we're obviously going to love for IDP purposes. 6.6% run stop rate, also the second best in this class. That's a stable metric for us, and just has great recognition and coverage tools that I think could be developed even more in the NFL. So he's one that I'm definitely kind of excited about. But how are you feeling about Bishop? Because I'm excited to get your thoughts on him as well.
Yeah, I think we're both kind of kicking ourselves, maybe rushed that pre-draft episode a little bit and didn't really. So now Bishop kind of has like this almost like meteoric rise based on draft capital and landing spot, where we really should have just kind of discussed some pre-draft. But I'm with you, like kind of everything you said. Like he has all the tools to, kind of be that almost DB1 in this class, and feel like a jerk, because we didn't even bring him up. Instead, we brought up his slow ass teammate. But I have him as potential rookie DB1 candidate here. I love the spot. You had Poyer last season, I think over 400, almost 420 box snaps. But Bishop, my biggest concern is Sean McDermott. Like the defense isn't going to change, whether it's Leslie Frazier, Sean McDermott calling plays, or now Babick. It's the same defense. The Bills are going to employ the same thing that they've employed for the better part of a decade, which is, sitting in that, having Tron Johnson on the field 97% of the time or whatever it is. But I do like it. I'm just concerned about McDermott not playing a rookie. I'm with you. I do think at some point, either throughout the preseason, throughout the mini camps, I think that is going to be the decision on Micah Hyde. I think they're going to see what they have. I do think they're pretty confident in having Mike Edwards. I think 2-time Super Bowl champion, I think he might have been, with Tampa and Kansas City. Those are the type of guys that like McDermott, and when Frazier was here, and those kind of culture guys. But I think, as much as they bought into Dalton Kincaid last year, the Bills tend to do stuff like this as being a Buffalo, living in Buffalo is, they hit on one draft pick from one university, and then it's every guy from that university is great. So, but I think Bishop kind of fits the mold of what they saw in Kincaid of like, hey, this guy's going to be good. We're all in. So it's just a matter of him getting the snaps. And I don't think Taylor Rapp is particularly great. I think Mike Edwards is a steady placeholder, but I think ultimately that backfield should be led by Bishop, and it's just going to be a matter of how quickly he earns the respect and learns that defense. But the Bills have struggled too. Now with Bernard and Milano potentially back, you're not taking Teron off the field, but they have really struggled to kind of find that guy who's mismatched for coverage. Trying to stop Travis Kelce, which they have failed to do for five or so years now, is like getting a guy in there who they feel like can do that and bring them, whether it's bringing them down to the line of scrimmage or just kind of even bringing them in there as like that X factor on defense to kind of, you know, stop the go-to target. I think they might do that. They've been trying to bring in coverage linebackers and other guys, you know, and I just think these guys aren't developing enough in time. So, but Bishop is kind of, I think if you would have told Bills fans that Poyer was going to go, you know, obviously his play was declining over the last couple of years anyway. But I think if you're going to say you're going to get rid of him and kind of bring in like a sort of Poyer mold guy in Bishop and being able to kind of maybe learn from some veteran leadership for even half a season or a full season. But yeah, I think IDP managers will be all over Bishop in this case because there's very few teams that have just said, hey, we've had the same safeties starting for 7 years. Let's get rid of both of them. You know what I mean? Yeah. Any rookie that goes into that situation is kind of looking like, hey, is he going to produce like, you know, like Prime Poyer did where he helped, you know, win some IDP managers some leagues. So, but yeah, I like the spot. I think 312 is the earliest I've seen so far. And, but typically that fourth round, but I'm, you know, with you, I'm seeing him come off as DB1 more often than not. And, you know, with all due respect, like I think that is probably right for him in terms of getting instant production, especially if you have a need at that safety position on your roster.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm absolutely with you. I think he's an exciting prospect here and somebody that we could be talking about for IDP for a little while. And like you said, maybe it doesn't happen year one, right? Like it does feel like the Rapp and Edwards are going to be the starters. So that, you know, keeps him off the field a little bit. But I think there's definitely potential there. He's similar to Jordan Battle last year, right? Is almost very similar in that, you know, this was a team that the Bengals where they lost their top two safeties in Jesse Bates and Von Bell and replaced them with a couple guys and, you know, that were fine. Dax Hill was good, Dax Hill actually struggled last year, but Dax Hill was highly drafted. Nick Scott was somebody they brought in who was just kind of mid, right? So I think there's a potential there that, you know, when Battle worked his way onto the field late in year one, I think we could see something similar for Cole Bishop as well, potentially if, you know, Taylor Rapp struggles or if Mike Edwards struggles, whatever it happens to be. But I do like the long-term potential at the very least here for Cole Bishop. Okay, next up, we venture out of the second round now. Again, we you know, left off a lot of the wide corners who were drafted much earlier because, again, pretty simple evaluation that most can do when it comes to IDP. So third round it is now, where we saw USC safety Calen Bullock get drafted by the Houston Texans. JG, what did you think about this landing spot?
I think I was all over it with Bullock. I think like the NFL is going to fall in love with the fact that he's young, he's long, he has the big play ability, the development, like you see the upside there. I just think like I'm going to stick to my point. Like I just don't think he's going to be very good for IDP. The guy couldn't tackle anything at USC. I don't see that changing in the NFL. Like, it's a stacked depth chart for Houston right now, but like Jimmy Ward, I don't know how healthy he's going to stay or how long he's going to stay there. I am a believer 100% in D'Amico Ryan's defense. So I think like I like, you know, bringing in the pieces, and I think he's going to find ways to use them. Bringing in Kamari Lassiter also sucks because you don't know if like, hey, did they have a plan for Bullock to maybe, you know, use his length and his, you know, skill to match him up in the slot or anything like that, even part-time. It just seems like Bullock is going to be developmental. I don't see a place where he's playing consistent snaps. I think I like him more. I'll stick to I like him more as a real NFL player. I could see this guy making plays for a long time on Sundays, but I just don't, from an IDP standpoint, like, I mean, if you're watching his tape, there's no way you believe that he's going to just become a miraculous, consistent tackler overnight. Mm-hmm. Like, I think you're looking at one of those rare guys who's going to have more assists than solos, like, you know, and like tons of them, you know what I mean, on potential, like, you know, maybe big plays or, you know, whatever it may be. So, I like I said, I mean, like there might be a scenario where he's starting, you know, a year from now, but again, I just don't think it's something that IDP managers are going to be looking at or kicking themselves that they didn't draft him.
I am 100% with you. I remember, we weren't overly excited about Bullock, mostly because he was that prototypical like deep safety that wasn't likely going to hold up around the line of scrimmage. Again, the tackling problems. So we tend not to fall in love with these guys for the most part. But like he did have like pretty decent ball skills. We talked about that. Has some good closing speed. I think he can be an eventual impactful player in D'Amico Ryans' defense. I just don't know that it'll be this year either. Like you said, you got Jalen Pitre and then Jimmy Ward there right now, who should start. Ward is on the final year of his contract though, so that potentially helps Bullock's case long term for those that are picking him up probably after most rookie drafts. Just I think he's unlikely to get drafted in most formats. And then D'Amico Ryans' defense too. It's also not like overly conducive to tackle production for his safeties. It was a big reason why I kept talking about the expected regression of Jalen Pitre after his massive rookie year. It's a primarily too high defense that allowed the linebackers to do a lot more of the work there in terms of tackle production. And that isn't likely going to change here much this season either. So I'm with you. I think Bullock could eventually end up being a really good NFL player in Houston, potentially starting in 2025. And maybe that leads to some big IDP games. But, consistency, I think, is going to be the biggest determining factor when it comes to whether he's on an IDP roster in the majority of leagues. And, he's like safety 4 or 5 for me, depending on the day, really, in this rookie class, but not really an option outside of those 7-round rookie drafts for me, most likely.
To be fair, even if Jimmy Ward wasn't there and he was starting, I don't think my opinion's changing a ton. Based off of, kind of your point too of the defense that he plays in, and I think the skill set of what he possesses. I just think that he's going to be one of those guys where you're like, oh, this is, you're relying on the big plays. So if it's a big play dependent league, but still, I think you're looking at a guy like this as a streamer and, a guy that you'll see on more waiver wires than you'll see on rosters over his career.
Yeah, so I think that's fair. All right. Another reason we titled this episode DBs and not safeties specifically is because there are a few guys here we're talking about that aren't necessarily your typical safety, like a Cooper DeJean or Javon Bullard, but also this next guy who we also covered pre-draft. It's Tykee Smith out of Georgia. He was drafted in the 3rd round, 90th overall. But for Smith, I really do think that he's going to be that nickel corner in the NFL. That was the thinking for me pre-draft. That doesn't really change much here post-draft now that he's landed with Tampa Bay. I did think he might end up being more of like a day 3 guy. So nice to see him, get a little bit of a bump there in value post-draft. They obviously just locked up Antoine Winfield. Shout out to him, becoming the highest paid defensive back in the league. Well deserved. And then they also have Jordan Whitehead, who does have familiarity there and starting experience. So I don't think he's likely to cede his starting spot this year either at safety. So the best path to snaps for Smith, as far as I'm concerned, is that nickel corner spot. Even though there's a couple guys there who also have some experience and success in the NFL, like Christian Izien, he played that starting role last year for the Bucs as a rookie UDFA and actually performed, decently well, all things considered. 66.5 coverage grade, but 80.3 run defense grade, so fit that role rather nicely. They also brought in Tavier Thomas, who I've always liked him quite a bit. He just hasn't been able to stay on the field, which has been a bummer, but otherwise he's been usually a really effective IDP when he's given a starting nod. So you have a couple of guys there to beat out if you're Smith, but both of them are former UDFAs, mind you. And I don't know. I like his chances of getting on the field this season, even if it's not week 1. I think he can be a starter there by the end of the year. One of the other things that we talked about pre-draft with Tykee Smith was his ability to blitz. I thought he looked really good doing it. It was a natural role for him, if he can get that opportunity in the NFL. And one thing that Todd Bowles loves to do is blitz, right? We know this. He was a top 3 team in the league last year in overall blitz rate, and the Bucs rushed their corners the 2nd most among any team in the league. So if Tykee Smith gets on the field, there's something I'd be expecting him to do quite often and be productive at right away, making him kind of all the more interesting for IDP. So he's kind of like, I guess, that 3rd corner guy for me among those corners that we've talked about, like, or the expected corners, the Cooper DeJean, Javon Bullard types. We'll see with Bullard. I think he's probably going to be that safety most likely, like we said, but in that range, guys that are designated corners at the moment, I think Tykee Smith is right in that same range for me, the, you know, 5th round type guy that I might be able to draft. Again, hoping that it's later than that, but fine taking him there if needed. So what did you think about Tykee Smith in Tampa Bay?
Big boost for me for Tykee going there. I don't see a scenario where he doesn't man that nickelback role. I know there's a couple names there, but to your point, a couple UDFAs, and I mean, those guys aren't impressive by any means. That's an overall weak depth chart outside of Winfield. You know what I mean? It's not, there's not a ton there. I think what I envisioned for Bullard a season ago, had he come out, was kind of what Tykee Smith got, is coming out of that star position slot role for Georgia, is kind of getting drafted to play more or less that same thing in the NFL. I like to see Tykee, you know, stay there, because I do think he was, you know, very effective there. I think had draft positions been changed between Smith and Bullard, we'd be rising Bullard up even higher, because I think this would be like the money spot for him, especially to your point with Todd Bowles and how much they're sending DBs. And I mean, if you look at that defensive line these days, you have to, if you want to get any pressure. So, but yeah, I mean, I like him. I think, you know, he's a guy that's not getting drafted either. So, I mean, IDP managers aren't going to have to really stretch at all to get him. But if it's a guy, you know, even in right now, I think listed as safety, if it's a guy and you're in a cornerback required league, maybe it's worth a flyer at the end of the 7th round, you know, to stash on your roster and, you know, potentially get some effectiveness out of him. But I look forward to seeing kind of like how the season develops and how he plays, because I think he can be effective, and he, you know, he's a young DB, but I mean, the landing spot, I think, boosted him up a bit for me. And if we can see the play that, you know, he showed us at Georgia in that defense, and especially being effective as a blitzer, we see it in some of the better nickel corners in the NFL. That ability to be a impact edge rusher out of that slot is, you know, it's not something a lot of guys can do effectively. So that would be one of the, you know, the things that could really rise his value and his production, because, you know, sacks are big plays. And, you know, I mean, you don't have a lot of DBs that are up around the 5-6 sack mark. If he's in a situation with Todd Bowles where, you know, they are blitzing a ton, you know, you're going to put your athletes on the field, and Tykee Smith is a good athlete. So you put him on the field, and he's getting, you know, after some quarterbacks, he's going to have some spot weeks where you're going to get some production out of him, potentially win a week because of it, or, you know, win a game because of it. So just, you know, the fun part of being a dynasty fantasy football player is figuring out when those weeks are.
Yeah, that is always the fun part, especially with defensive backs. It's an extremely frustrating position at times, but I'm with you. Like, if he does get that starting nickel role in Todd Bowles' defense, like, that could be a really fun fit here for Tykee Smith. And, you know, in those CB required leagues, if he does go undrafted, he's one of the guys that I'm going to be looking to potentially add in free agency, kind of hold and to see how things shake out in camp. If I find out that he wins that starting job, then he's somebody that I could imagine I'd be starting in my cornerback slots during the season, just because of that usage and potential for production there. So, yeah, Tykee Smith, fun name, fun landing spot. All right, next man up is drafted in the 3rd round. You got your guy here out of Miami, heading to the Los Angeles Rams to form the Kamren safety connection there. It's Kamren Kinchens. How you feeling about this landing spot for your guy Kinchens?
I liked it. We were a little nervous, I think, you and I, you know, kind of texting back and forth of like, when are our guys going to go? Yeah. But yeah, happy to see. I think Cam was like right under the buzzer of day 2 there, and you know, it was kind of nice to see him get a landing spot there. And Rams are another team, kind of you know, a la the Packers there, of like really just trying to build youth on that defense with, you know, after their Super Bowl run. You know, it's how teams typically do, and try to rebuild through the draft. But Spent a good penny on Cam Curl, and then you bring in Kinchens, who, you know, he has the versatility, but, you know, I think right now you're probably looking at him as a backup to Cam Curl. They'll probably give you Russ Yeast another shot to be as mid as ever. But, you know, I think at a certain point, you're probably, you do try to get your best players on the field. You know, the Rams are overall weak at pretty much everything except their front right now. I think they've invested quite a bit into, you know, kind of boosting up that front to get after pass rushers. Limited depth in that secondary. I think I have them undrafted in 2 of 7 drafts so far. But I still like them. You know, I mean, I you know, being a Miami guy, I'm going to kind of have a soft spot and a little bit of bias there. But I do like the way he could fit into that defense. I think he's a good player. He has a lot of experience. He's going to step in there and play. It's just going to be a matter of what his role is exactly going to be. I know we've kind of, you know, talked about versatility at Miami, but versatility in the ACC versus versatility in the NFL are wildly different. You know, he was kind of big play dependent in college, and, you know, to a big point of just kind of feasting on some mediocre quarterback play. But I like him overall. I wouldn't be going crazy. I think in that same round that we're talking about some of those other safeties, I think he's more 6th, 7th round there, where if you're looking for a DB and a guy who potentially has a path to starting, but he might be kind of your Jordan Battle, where you're not, you know, you might not get any production on him until week 10, week 11, and all of a sudden he's having some of these like big weeks. You don't want to draft a guy under the contingency that the guy in front of him is going to get hurt, or, you know, whatever it may be. But I do like the player overall and think that he's going to add some IDP value at some point, whether it's this year or early next season.
Yeah. It's one of those landing spots. Yeah, I could definitely see it going either way. Like you said, Cam Curl, other than him, you know, it's Russ Yeast, it's Quentin Lake. Like, Yeast was kind of thrust into a starting role last year. Like, this guy's a former 7th round pick as well, from 2022. I don't think he really did enough last year to be like, you know, for the Rams to be like, this is our guy now. So for me, like, he's penciled in as the starter at best. I'm not locking Russ Yeast into that role. Then there's Quentin Lake, who I thought played well in the slot. I think that's maybe the best spot for him, even over like a Kobe Durant, for example. I think that's kind of the potential camp battle there for the nickel role is Kobe Durant versus Quentin Lake, and then, you know, maybe Kinchens versus Yeast at safety. So, you know, if I'm picking 2 guys there that I like, it's Lake and Kinchens to emerge as the starters. Whether that actually happens, we'll see. But, you know, we got Cam Curl, obviously, and then, you know, Darius Williams and Tre'Davious White, who they brought in this offseason as well. Like, I don't mind the secondary, you know, all of a sudden for the Rams. Like, it's not a deep secondary, but as far as starters go right now, it looks much improved from last year, you know, at least compared to last year. So, you know, they're kind of a fun defense. Like, aside from losing Aaron Donald, obviously, was a massive blow, but I think they've done, you know, quite a bit to kind of supplement the loss there, you know, around the defense, getting Jared Verse and Braden Fisk in the draft as well. And now Kinchens. I think it could be a fun group, but like you said, Kinchens, for me, at the very earliest is end of the 5th. That's the earliest I'd be looking to take him. You know, starting safety is his primary value right now, but that's not a guarantee that it happens this year. So could end up just living on your taxi squad, which you'd probably just hope to use those spots on more valuable positions, right? So could be somebody that continues to go undrafted here. I don't think we're rushing to get him, but just a name to kind of keep in mind that could emerge. Okay, last scheduled name here, and one that we didn't get to talk about pre-draft either, taken in the 4th round by the Arizona Cardinals. It was Dadrion Taylor-Demerson. 4th round, 105th overall. I'll be honest, I'm not overly excited about this one. He's not necessarily someone I'm looking to draft really at all in rookie drafts, even in those 7 rounders. I think for me, you know, he projects almost exclusively as a deep safety, saw just 15.7% of his career snaps in the box at Texas Tech, 52.1% coming from that deep alignment. Arizona's defense last year was actually the second lowest in single high rate in the league at 37.8%. So he's mostly going to be staying deep, even if he does get on the field this year, which I don't love his chances of either. He's got, locked in starters there, Budda Baker, Jalen Thompson ahead of him on the depth chart. Maybe Budda gets traded. There were rumors of that last year, but until that happens, I don't think this is a guy that I'm going to be overly excited about, even if he is on the field. I don't know. I don't think I'll have really any regrets about letting anyone else in my league scoop him up if they like. I'm just not interested in Dadrion. Maybe you can show him some love on Father's Day, old Dadrion, but that's about it for me. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, DTD is probably the coolest thing about him. But yeah, I think it's Arizona's probably stuck in that scenario where I think Buddha's on the last year, or there's an opt-out after this year. And like you said, I think there's been like at least 2 full seasons now we've been dealing with he's going to get moved and this and that. But yeah, I mean, I think Arizona just felt like they needed to get some sort of depth back there. Buddha did miss time last year. So, but yeah, I'm not overly impressed either. I think he's more of a, coverage guy. I think he's a guy that is, you could trot out there and he's better than signing a guy who hasn't played in the NFL in a year or so, and you're snagging off of waivers to kind of come in for some veteran leadership. Let him develop and see what happens. I mean, even with a Buddha injury in front of him, I'm not sure that I'm really buying. I think there's going to be, enough out there on the waiver wire, as there kind of always is at DB, that you feel like you can get some more consistent production. Again, he could surprise you, but I don't see a scenario where he's being taken in any rookie drafts that, 7 rounds that, he's not adding any kind of value to you. So, hopefully he surprises us and, kind of gets on the field or something like that. But I'm not super excited, and especially to your point with the safety usage in single high. So, I mean, the writing's not on the wall. I have no regrets, John. I'm not talking about him pre-draft.
Right. Yeah. I mean, like you said, but hopefully he surprises us. We welcome those kinds of things. We want more, DBs to talk about, new DBs to talk about for IDP. But, he did perform well, like in our stable metrics and things like that for the last 2 years. But he's just, I don't know, just the defense, the potential on the depth chart, everything is kind of against here, DTD. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. But okay, I think we got one more name to discuss here, because I think the NFL got this one wrong in a big way. Not quite to Ivan Pace levels last year, but I think teams are going to regret letting Jaden Hicks fall to the 4th round to the Kansas City Chiefs of all teams. So this is a guy who we talked about pre-draft. I obviously loved him and his potential heading into the draft. He was my safety 1 for this class, so that's fine. I could take the L there. I've had no choice really but to kind of cool the Jets on the ranks here post-draft, now that we've kind of seen how things shaken out. But I still think like he is much better than some of the guys taken ahead of him. And I think for IDP purposes, he could end up being a really productive piece there in Kansas City. If not consistently year 1, then beyond that for sure. Like, he really is that prototypical IDP safety that we're constantly looking for every year when doing our IDP drafts, whether it's rookie drafts, redraft, whatever. He kind of does it all. No safety in this class spent a higher percentage of snaps in the box during their college career than Jaden Hicks at 47.5%. As a result, he was top 5 in career first contact rate and tackle rate for this class, and 6th in run stop rate. Like, he's an absolute man missile out there when attacking ball carriers too. Like, he can cover as well. He could flip his hips, get downfield, stay tight to wide receivers if you need him to. And I think, how he fits into Kansas City is going to be interesting, because I think at least as a rookie, there's a path to valuable sub-package snaps here. And Kansas City is one of those teams that played dime at a top 5 rate last season, 22.1%. And within that deployment specifically is a role for Hicks to kind of be their true box safety around the line of scrimmage while guys like Justin Reid and Brian Cook play deep. This is actually kind of is really like essentially the Dan Sorensen role that we all complained about him being on the field too much back in the day. Well, now Hicks could at least play those snaps and actually be someone that we root for to stay on the field even more, because I think he's a better player than what Dan Sorensen was, and he won't miss as many tackles ideally, which isn't a high bar to set. Admittedly, that dude was missing like nearly 20 tackles a year when he was getting that usage. So, I think that's a role for him in year one, and then beyond this year, we'll see what happens with Justin Reid, who's in the final year of his contract this year. So, potentially absorbing those snaps as well could obviously be huge as well, while still being the box safety in dime personnel. I'm definitely still in on Hicks and fine spending like a late rookie pick on him to make sure I can get in on that IDP potential now. So, how about you? How are you feeling about Hicks in Kansas City here?
I know we kind of always have this from whether it be a real football discussion or whatever, but the Kansas City Chiefs just like being gifted all of these things and, hitting just grand slams and, whatever. But yeah, I mean, Hicks landing in this role is like, I think you look at Spags and the way he deploys his defense is definitely unique and unpredictable, which is, why they've been to, pretty much every AFC championship over like the last decade or so or whatever we're going on now. But, obviously the quarterback has a lot to do with that. But, and I think you look at what Spags did with that kind of youth movement along the defense, they're consistently not spending money on defense outside of what you need, which is, your Chris Jones. But yeah, I mean, I think to your point, like, I mean, I don't know if you can die on that hill that he's slightly better than Daniel Sorensen. So, yeah, I mean, I think Hicks is like we've talked about him so much in pre-draft. It's an L that we both kind of held, but at least it wasn't an L where we're waiting in the 6th and 7th round for the guy to get drafted. Right. So I think this is still a position where you're potentially getting starting snaps at the NFL level. But yeah, he fits in. I mean, Justin Reid has kind of revived what was left of his career going under Spags. I'm not the biggest Brian Cook fan. I think Hicks is a much better player. I don't know if that's the role like long term, but I mean, I think you look at what Spags does from a matchup perspective and all of those type of things. A few years ago when he got, I think, Watson and Trent McDuffie as rookies, I don't really have the same concern I have with Buffalo where them not playing rookies as much, because I think Spags is going to look at how am I going to get the best players on the field in the best position to win the game. And I think, not having that bias is nice because, you give those guys time to develop and learn the defense and be free to make mistakes because you have Patrick Mahomes to get it back for you on the other side, but yeah, I love the landing spot. Did not affect much from a ranking perspective for me. I'm not even going to give you the ADP data I collected because it's biased, because I think out of 7 drafts, I have him in 6 of them. I am still, yes, all in and we can, play tug of war with that L that we're holding for now. Sure. But I do, kind of firmly believe that that's not going to be an L, even by the end of the season. I think it's going to be a spot where people are going into next year, maybe looking at it like, should have listened to those guys. But love the landing spot. The 1 year with like you're talking about with Reed and all that kind of stuff is, if it is kind of he takes over that a year from now, I think we're all sitting pretty of drafting him in the 5th, 6th, 7th round and got a potential, high performer at the DB position.
Yeah, I'm with you. Hoping that it's a temporary L for the most part, right? Like similar to Ivan Pace. I got that one back pretty quick. I'm gonna say that this year's Ivan Pace, not a linebacker, but instead of safety here, Jaden Hicks, going to the Kansas City Chiefs. So we'll see what happens, but that is gonna wrap it up for today. Again, hopefully that helps you all navigate the end of those rookie drafts a bit better, knowing which DBs to target and why. If you're looking for the defensive line or linebacker linebacker discussions. Joey the Tooth, Kyle Bellefieu, and I covered those the past 2 weeks. So you can find those in the feed now as well. But most importantly, huge shout out to my guy, Jon Glosser. Always a good time talking IDP with you, getting to pick your brain as well. I really appreciate you making time to do this with me every year, and hopefully for many years to come, brother. So thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Always appreciate it. And go gather up those DBs.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, we got to bring up that ADP for Jaden Hicks single-handedly, potentially. We'll see how it goes. But before you do go, please remind everybody where they can find more of you and your work as well.
All my work at dynastynerds.com. Check it out over there. We have some rankings, some those rookie profiles you still want, some mixed IDP and Superflex data to kind of help you out as it's crazy rookie draft season. And I know you feel like you have a plan, and then you get on the clock and you get sniped, or you're worried about it, and then you find yourself scrambling while you're on the clock and you're getting slayed in the group chat. So, feel free to use all those resources. And, Jon as well has those mixed rankings, and those are extremely helpful. I can't tell you, when we started playing years ago, those did not exist. So please take advantage of all those resources. And then at Glosser13 on the X Machine or Twitter or whatever you want to call it.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Yeah. Check out Jon's work over at dynastynerds.com for sure. And again, thank you all for tuning in and listening. If you're on the YouTube, please don't forget to like and subscribe as well. It helps us a ton. As for me, again, all my work on PFF.com. We got the rookie IDP sleepers, veteran IDP winners and losers, post NFL draft. The offensive sleepers are up there as well. Those all came out last week. This week actually should be out Friday morning. So when you're listening or watching this, it will be out on PFF.com. But I think people who are into IDP are going to like it. I created kind of a general team tackle projections for the linebacker position using expected linebacker usage and defensive coverage schemes together to kind of give an idea which team linebacker roles we should be targeting in 2024. So this should be an interesting read, hopefully, for people that are into IDP. I appreciate anyone who checks that out as well. And let me know what you think, if I should do the same for defensive line and or for defensive backs as well. So again, that's all for today. Thank you all again for tuning in, and until next time, peace out.